All right, welcome back to another web development podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Today, we are going to dive into all the major reasons, common reasons that we think developers aren't getting jobs. What's holding them back? And Ludo, you and I have had a lot of conversations. If people don't know who you are, Ludo is the CEO of NewCamp. So he obviously has a pretty important place in the industry for helping a lot of aspiring developers finally break into the industry. I had a lot of kind of side conversations with him. I like his thought process. I think he has a lot of cool ideas. So we're going to dive into them. But welcome.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for having me again. Hello, everyone.
It's always fun. We always have a lot of good conversations.
I agree. Yeah.
Well,
animated sometimes, but pretty good.
Yeah. Well, those are fun for me. As long as I honestly need to start talking with a lot more people in the industry that heavily disagree with me as well. Those are really fun conversations as long as they're constructive. I love those kind of animated conversations, but I'll do more of those in the podcast. But let's dive into things. So I brought you on for a reason. Kind of just want to feel the landscape. We'll kind of just go through things one at a time. We'll talk it out a bit. But yeah, so what is one way that you feel what's one of the reasons that you feel like developers just will not get a job? What's the reason for that? Yeah.
And we're going to go through the list, right? That we kind of thought about. But one of the first one that I would mention is wanting to go into the industry for, I would say, the wrong reasons. And the wrong reasons will be just doing it for the money, without really validating that you're going to actually enjoy the job. And of course, there's going to be a ton of people who are going to want and need, the compensation and the level of compensation. And that's often is reason enough, but they place in second position, actually enjoying the day-to-day of being a web developer. And I say that it's something people should actually test, because you can actually know pretty easily without risk and without cost if you're actually going to enjoy it. And so one way is obviously is you go online, there's a plethora of free resources, and I know you've been advocating for many of them, but spend time before doing anything else. Spend time doing those free resources, learning on your own, to really validate that, okay, beyond the compensation, you're actually going to find a job that you're going to enjoy and like. And I would say the more you're going to struggle in those moments learning online, the more you're going to realize if you like it or not, because the liking of it is really liking it during the struggle. And I know we'll talk about that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It was kind of hard when I had this thought a while back, years ago. A lot of people are just looking to up their financial situation. They're looking for a better life, and it's completely understandable, and I can empathize with that. And the reason why it's always a hard no, if that's their main priority for me, is just because most people that go into software engineering with that mindset and just focused on the money, it's they usually just don't become software engineers, right? They give up along the way. They realize they don't really enjoy coding, but there are other professions that you can go into that can pay more than what you're currently making, that are easier to get into than software engineering. Software engineering, I think maybe saying you have to have a passion for it might be a little hyperbolic. You don't need to be passionate about it, but you need to love the struggles. If you're spending 3 hours on this stupid little bug and you can't figure out where it is, you can get frustrated in the moment. But if you don't have that aha moment and you're like, oh my God, finally, all right, let's do it again. Let's go to the next bug. If you don't have that, it's a long journey. It's going to be rough for you.
That's right. It's super demanding of your time, your commitment, and emotionally as well. It's going to be very demanding. You'll hear people say, "Hey, I had to work, every night, every weekend, 2 to 4 hours a day." And if you're just doing it, if your only motivation is the money, chances are it's not going to be enough to get you through that. I'm seeing sometimes, people that are joining the bootcamp without having done that due diligence, they're like, oh, I need a new job. What can I do? And I'm going to sign up to the bootcamp. That's going to be my very first step. And that's kind of that's a risk. That's a big risk. because there's so many things you could do before signing up, because once you sign up, you're committing to, financially and the schedule and everything. So I think, it's an easy one to actually check off your list. Just make sure that you're enjoying it. That's something that you're going to be able to stay committed to.
Yeah. Well, so, you and I could say, do these free resources, give it a try, right? But I think a lot of people still have the question of, well, where is the line in the sand drawn of where, like, I'm going to know, like, what am I looking for? How do I truly know, like, this is for me? It's like, yeah, I kind of like solving the problem, but like, what does that mean? Like, can you elaborate more on like what, and this is kind of a really hard question. I don't think I fully thought it out, but can you elaborate more on like what software engineers should be looking for to really confirm that for themselves?
Yeah, no, totally. So the wrong way of validating it will be doing simple tutorials online that only ask of you to copy and paste to reproduce the steps. And you're going to find enjoyment, and it's going to be quote unquote easy because you're going to copy paste. It's going to work and be like, yeah, I love it. It's working. Find, I would say, more longer courses that put you in situations of not giving you all the answers. So find, I know, and it's probably more of a free code camp or a code academy or something like that, that really is going to teach you some concepts. And yes, during that time, you're going to do copy and paste. You're going to, practice in a quasi-controlled way. But then you're going to be asked to solve a problem and you don't have all the answers, which means you're going to have to be critically thinking about what you just learned, how you're going to apply that. And the very first thing you're going to experience is it's not going to work. Like it used to work really great when you were doing just copy and paste, but it's not going to work at all probably when you're going to be like having to practice without all the answers. And that's the moment where are you able to spend the next 3 hours, banging your head against the wall, wondering why is it not working, and get at the end of that, and hopefully you'll have find the solution and feel a real rush of emotion, of positive emotion, and really looking back and saying, okay, I really actually enjoyed the struggle and I enjoyed solving the problem. If you can go through that sequence, I will say, and you're at the end of it, and you were resourceful enough to fix it, I think it's a great sign. It doesn't mean that you're out of the woods. That doesn't mean that you're going to still continue to enjoy it, but it's a great sign that, you may actually be ready for learning more.
Let me ask you this. We're going to take it I think was a really good answer. But let's take it a step back. And, so a lot of coding boot camps are like, I would say 95% of them are web development focused. And I have a lot of people that come to me and they're just like, I want to learn coding. And then I have to dive into like what that means. Like what about coding has you interested and piqued your curiosity? But like a lot of people, they hear, okay, I think my question is changing real time. So they hear web development is the way to go. Every coding bootcamp is teaching web development. But they kind of got interested in it because like, they're like, oh, I wish I could build a mobile app. I wish I could build like a desktop app to do things a little bit differently. Like I'm sick and tired of QuickBooks or I don't know, something like that. Like I've seen people on LinkedIn sharing their QuickBooks is the financial app. That's what it's called, right?
That's right. Yeah. QuickBooks. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're just sharing like their different versions of like a desktop version of QuickBooks and like trying to make it simpler for people. I see stuff like that. And that, I see people, when you kind of have like a focus like that, you keep diving into it deeper and deeper and deeper because that's a problem you really want to solve. So I don't want to tell people just go into web development. I don't think that's the right advice. But what kind of advice would you give people that like just know they want to get into coding, but they don't really know which area of coding? How do you explore that?
Like between mobile apps, between web dev, between or an app, a desktop app, or maybe just building an e-commerce website on Wix or whatever, those types of different things. Or
getting into like low-level programming and
like getting Java or like onboarding, embedded devices or Bitcoin. How do you know which way to go? It's well, I'll say that you could look at it from, okay, what's local to your area, what kind of companies are, hiring, what those companies are, which skills are those companies hiring for. If you're looking into, working locally, it's a tough one. And there's also a different type of answer, which is, if you really want to be able to bifurcate in any direction, then maybe computer science is the way to go, because you'll have all the fundamental knowledge and a lot of exposure in those different areas that will mean that you'll be able to pick up then where you want to go, which is why, by the way, people laugh, because a computer science graduate can't build a website. They can't build a mobile app. But they have the skills to get into any of those fields if they choose to. So it's a tough one. I'll say, if you really don't know and you just want to make a safe bet, I'll say still go to web dev, because it's kind of the safe bet. I will also try to avoid things that are more advanced in terms of expectations. Like, you can become a data scientist right off the bat, right? There's levels of knowledge that you need to acquire before being a real good data scientist. Same thing for machine learning. You can't just go there, straight there. It's like saying, I can become a surgeon, and yet I haven't done year one of learning medicine. No, there's a hierarchy of skills that you need to acquire to get in some areas.
I can hear all the data science boot camps just shaking their fists right now.
Don't you agree? I think you have to have, first, data science, you have to have some knowledge of SQL. You have to have some knowledge of Python. You have to learn all those fundamentals before you get into, okay, how am I going to analyze the data? And I'm talking data science, not data analytics. Data analytics, you can do it, with Tableau. It's kind of easier to grasp, but real data science, it's a bigger deal. So, yeah.
That was another really good answer. It is hard. And I think that's the essence of really what I got out of it. I don't know if there is an answer. It's you can't explore trying to build a mobile app, because it takes time to learn the framework and just set everything up and learn the language that you need to learn and build a mobile app and then move to a desktop app. And you might try hybrid approaches. JavaScript can expand to a lot of different areas as well, which is interesting. But it's really hard to do that. But computer science, to kind of get a general feel. I want to move on from this topic, because I know there are more things, but anyone in the comments, I want you to let me know, are there any good courses that literally give you a good overlay of the trajectories of each path? Because I don't think I've come across any. I think Harvard had a CS50, which is a really good CS fundamentals class, but to actually go over a lot of career trajectories and have that course go into detail about it, let me know. I'm curious.
There's a meme in that space as well. I can't remember exactly what the meme says. And it's, before choosing a language, you really need to think about what you're going to do for front end, what you're going to do for back end, what you're going to do to access your data, what you're going to do to blah, 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 blah. And then the answer is, okay, JavaScript. So there's a meme that says, no matter what you're going to want to build, if you bet on JavaScript, chances are you're going to be able to do it. And it's not that JavaScript, actually, it's kind of a trade of all jacks, jack of all trades, sorry. So anyway.
Ooh, that's already going to ruffle a few feathers, and I love it. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I do. So, okay. I think that gave me kind of a good feel. So in essence, just really solidify that you're going to enjoy coding. Take some time into it. Definitely don't jump into a coding bootcamp that costs thousands, tens of thousands right away, because I see a lot of people do that too often. What else holds people back? What's another reason someone will not become a developer?
Yeah, and continuing on that point, right? So you want to start online. No questions asked. You want to start online, free resources, figure out if you're going to like it. The problem is if you feel like you're getting stuck just doing that. And you've seen testimonials of people saying, hey, I'm a self-taught, but I've been doing it for 6 months, for 1 year. And self-taught is going to be harder in terms of demand on yourself, because you're going to have to be extra committed, extra rigorous with your time. And you're going to have to figure out a way to build your own path from, building a simple HTML form to learning React, to learning all the front end type of things. And so you have to recognize when you're stuck and when you need more help. And too often people confuse their failings as a self-taught developer with not being ready to be a developer. When actually what they're failing at is just being able to secure their time, staying committed, finding the right path, which are something that you can get from other resources, right? So find the signs that tell you that what you may be failing at is the support and the resources and the structure that you've created around you. And the answer, by the way, may not be a coding bootcamp straight away. I mean, you just mentioned CS50. Again, you can find really structured experiences online, some free, some not too expensive. But at some point, you're going to want to build on, you want to have a path of 6 months, of investment of your time. It's something that gradually builds upon what you've done before. And people talk about it as, the tutorial hell, where you keep repeating over and over the same type of exercise. You're going to do a tic-tac-toe here. You're going to do a pseudo, Netflix here. All of that is nice, but you need to move beyond and past that at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you said like a coding bootcamp definitely isn't necessarily that option. Because quite frankly, like, my audience, and I think people hearing like a CEO of a coding bootcamp would be like, oh, well, maybe he's just mentioned it because he has a coding bootcamp. But like we've talked about this before, and there are tons of other options. We've talked about like different opportunities for mentorship, career services, communities that you can join. It's like, let's actually dig into this for a few minutes. So I'm going to contribute something. I just want to hear what other things you feel like self-taught developers can take advantage of. So one, mentorship from an actual software engineer. So a couple things that you can do: reach out on LinkedIn, usually get involved with communities, or if you see like a software engineer make a post, make a comment on it. Like essentially when a software engineer creates a post, they love feedback is a strong word, but like they're creating that content to get some sort of feedback. And as a beginning software engineer, as a beginning content creator, I can tell you that feedback is very scarce in the beginning. So like anyone that's leaving feedback and leaving a comment like, hey, I love what you said here. I disagree with what you said here. Like that's golden to them. I guarantee you most people are going to enjoy that. So, finding software engineers on LinkedIn that are writing articles and stuff like that, leave a comment and then maybe reach out in the DMs and ask for 10 minutes of their time, but like give that value up front and, just be careful about how you word it. But I think 10 minutes, just asking someone to like bounce your ideas off of the path you're going down. Usually people can commit about 10 minutes. Once you start getting like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I feel like 10 minutes is a sweet spot once you've already contributed that value. But reach out to software engineers and like just kind of get a real software engineer's opinion. And I say this because I almost gave up on development because I just knew no software engineers in Indiana, like none whatsoever. I think the closest meetup was like some random tech meetup, an hour away, and like none of them were really software engineers. And sometimes you just don't have that around you. So get that feedback from a real software engineer.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I'll say for me, you're looking for something that's going to carry you for several months, right? Like 6 months. If it's self-taught, it could actually be a year. And so you want to create a system. And I'll use the gaming analogy, looking for group. I think the system quite often is going to be surrounding yourself with people that have the same intent and you progressing at the same pace. Right. And so that system is, you hear about it, it's pair programming. It's working on a project with other people. But you chances are, if you're doing it alone, or if you're one of 10,000 people, the extreme, like, super on Udemy type of courses where, there's thousands of people available to help you, but you really, at the end of the day, you feel alone. You want to have a group of people learning alongside you that are committed for the long run. And that's really the system of learning that you want to create. Now, of course, that's why some people would think of a coding bootcamp, because that's part of the package, right? And that's why there's a power in that. But I would say if you wanted to kind of replicate that, look for a group of people that are similar minded, and you want to have a tutor. You want to have someone that's going to kind of tell you what you're doing is right, is doing it well, or doing it wrong. But that's what I would try to do.
Yeah, that's good feedback. That's hard to replicate it. I feel like
that's really hard.
A lot of people give up. I think, honestly, like you touched on something incredibly important. A lot of self-taught developers give up because they do not have the support that they need.
Yeah. And it's not because they don't have the skills or they can't learn it. It's they don't realize how much they're lacking support and they're giving up. But again, because they don't have the support. And that support structure, well, let me plug what Coding Bootcamp in general do well and how it's hard to reproduce if you don't do it like that. What Coding Bootcamp do well is they're going to bring together people that are starting at the same date and are progressing together at the same pace, which means you are 100% guaranteed that for 6 months, you're always going to have people around you who are deeply into the same context that you are, so that when you have a problem, you're going to say, hey, I have a problem here. And you're going to find that other people may have just 5 minutes ago solved that problem or are totally aware of your context, right? And not going to help. Or you're going to have an instructor that's going to help. If you were to reproduce that on your own, the challenge is, first, it's going to be hard for the same group to progress at the same pace. And why is it important? It's because you said it before. If you randomly ask someone to help you, that person is going to give you 10 minutes. If you have to explain all the context of what type of help you need, you've already lost the 10 minutes. You're never actually going to get the actual help, because there's too much context in your request. That's why if you're learning on Udemy or Coursera or edX and you have an issue and you're asking in the forums, there's so much effort on the other hand to help you, because nobody is at the same pace, nobody is exactly where you are, that it's super hard to actually get the help at that moment in time. So that's ultimately what you're seeking. You're seeking the support of others and a cohort of people going through exactly the same thing at your own pace.
I want to say two things. Two things that changed networking for me entirely. When I was becoming a developer, often I share the story of I got my first job because I streamed on Twitch. I live streamed on Twitch. And I had no idea what I was doing. Thought people had no idea, like they didn't care what I had to say. They just they were probably going to be judgmental or leave. But what ended up happening was over time, I gained a lot of followers on Twitch, and I average about 30 to 50 viewers, which 7 years ago, that was kind of a lot for me. I've never had that many people watch me do something. But the beautiful thing is 95% of them were learning from me as I was trying to become a developer, right? And so what I did, I put myself out there. I shared my journey with people, and people started connecting with me because of my thought process. They connected with me because they saw me trying to help people, even though I didn't have tons of knowledge. They're like, this is pretty cool. He's just giving back the little that he can. And a really cool thing happened where I started to create kind of a little bit of a community and connect with other aspiring developers, other software engineers and they'd watch my content. And it was just they were kind of at a similar pace. They were trying to become developers. It was a really cool experience to create that group aspect, focus on that shared goal. And 5% of the viewers, they were senior software engineers that I could reach out to at any time. I could DM them. I could hop on Zoom with them. I had, people that would help me moderate my Discord community in the past. And I met, and it wasn't until I put myself out there, that's when I finally connected with all these senior software engineers, right? And so they were online, and I think I was a little bit too hesitant to ask for their help, which was it was an ego thing. It was a long time ago, so I don't really remember, but I should have put myself out there more to say, hey, can we hop on? I really want to check where I'm going with this. And so that was a really cool way that I recreated that experience a little bit. And so a second way was when I got into the software engineering industry, I still didn't know a whole lot of software engineers in Chicago. And, I met people on the team and, they'd be a little bit helpful. And then I decided to start a meetup. My meetup grew to 1,500 members. And all of a sudden I went from one small junior software engineer on a team to like a software engineer that's helping, over 1,000 other engineers. And now a lot of other senior engineers, CTOs, and people wanted to reach out and just say, at first just say like, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. If you ever need help, let me know. And I immediately, like when I put myself out there again to help people, created all these like countless number of connections that I have on LinkedIn right now. And I continue building them because I continue helping people. And so I'm not saying you have to become a content creator, but what I am saying is when you put yourself out there and you share that vulnerability and you're willing to help people and let them help you, you start to create that support group that a lot of self-taught developers, like if you want to get that support group, put yourself out there, share your story, share your projects, be vulnerable with it. That's where I see people starting to get a lot of support, even from senior software engineers that start guiding them along the right way.
No, you're absolutely right. So a few things to build on that. That trait of really putting yourself out there, networking, is going to help you throughout your journey, but it's going to also help you secure the job, right? Like you said, you've graduated, great. You need to put yourself out there at that moment as well to, share your progress, engage in conversations. There's a ton of value in you joining existing conversations and just chiming in. People who chime in are going to be noticed. People who don't and stay silent, nobody's going to see them. So just chime in, engage in the conversation. You don't have to lead them necessarily, right? You don't, to your point, not everyone needs to be a Twitch streamer, but engage, right? Engage in the conversation, share your point of view, show up as a smart guy or gal, and that's going to help. And I'll say something else. I think you talked about meetups. There was, unfortunately, before the pandemic, a wonderful website, meetup.com, that had a ton of, local groups of aspiring developers coming together with senior developers. I mean, there was a very vibrant scene of meetups, sometimes also sponsored by local companies. And that was, and hopefully maybe it still is in some areas in the US or the world, but that was a great environment for you to find those people that are trying to do exactly what you're trying to do and support you in your learning journey. So if you can find that's fantastic as well. Like join the local groups. Now maybe it's virtual, but if it's in person, even better, and create those connections.
Yeah, I mean, so I love the recommendation to like engage in conversations. And I think that was such good advice, right? Yeah, meetup. Just to give quick advice, like meetups, there's still meetups. I actually am shutting down my meetup this month, but that's just because of Chicago and just how everything's being operated there. But like, there are a lot of meetups still that exist. There are still meetups in person, online. There are Eventbrite. There's online Discord communities, online Slack communities, hackathons. There's so many opportunities to kind of engage. But yeah, it's just, man, you nailed it. It's like a lot of people are so scared just to engage in the conversation. I think a lot of people feel like they're going to sound stupid and like they're going to tell the world, look, I'm not as bright as I'm trying to sell myself as, right?
And the reality is it's a valid worry.
Sure.
Right. It's a tough one because you don't want to appear stupid. Indeed. You don't want to appear as a noob. And you could, but you have to build that confidence. And maybe the very first post, you're going to have them reviewed by someone else. I wouldn't, brush it off. I said, no, you're never going to look stupid. You could, and it could be a bad thing. Seriously.
Fair enough.
I have some idea. I have some reference in mind of people posting on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't know that I would have said that. And I don't know that it's going to look very good in the eyes of a recruiter. I'm not sure you should have done it. And so, you want to be thoughtful. You want to be thoughtful. Yeah.
And how you come, I guess that's a really good point. It's like, you're not going to look stupid just because you ask a technical question that you're like, who cares if you didn't know it? It's like the fact that you're even willing to ask that question. Do you know how many junior developers and entry-level developers that like will literally stunt their growth because they're not willing to ask more questions, right?
Yeah,
they're always, so if you're stuck, and sometimes people stay stuck for days without speaking up, this happens at coding boot camps, companies, but that's not what is going to make you look stupid. It's the wording and how you come across about how you ask a question. That's what you're kind of getting at.
It's more, how you're going to be, how your behavior is going to be interpreted, how your personality is going to be viewed. Are you more of a glass half full or glass empty kind of person? Are you going to be, it's all that. It's the perception you're going to create about who you are as an individual, not necessarily your technology level or, the technical questions you're going to ask.
Yeah, exactly. Keep it positive. Okay. What else? What's another thing that prevents developers from becoming developers?
So we've touched on it a little bit, but there's an emotional aspect to being a developer. And you see that sometimes in movies and stuff, right? One movie that I really enjoy is Social Network, that kind of described the journey of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. And you see them at some point, I think they're in California, they've rented a house and the developers are there. And Mark Zuckerberg, or the actor, says, no, you cannot talk to that person, he's in the zone. There is that notion that when you reach a point as a developer, you can actually really get completely involved in your code, you're in the zone, and you just created a bubble around you, right? And you could actually be in that zone for hours, just eating pizza, drinking, but you're not going to be available too much to any other people. You're not going to talk. You're just going to focus on your code. It's just an emotional trait. And I'm not saying everybody should be like that, but there is that notion that emotionally coding can be fully absorbing, and it could be very challenging to handle, especially when it doesn't work. Again, I go back to that. When the code doesn't work, you can have a level of stress that you're actually wondering if you're ever going to be able to solve it. And I've experienced that myself, by the way. The code that is in production is not working anymore, and it's bad. And you're looking at it and you're like, am I even going to be able to fix it? And there's a level of stress there. And the emotion is so high, you're going to hear people, literally saying, I want to bang my head against the wall. I want to throw the computer out the window. And for some people, it's too much. It's actually too high. And they don't want to live through that again. And so that's something you have to, evaluate for yourself as well when you are going to be in that situation. And by the way, you're going to be in that situation super quickly. I'm guarantee you're going to miss a semicolon somewhere very fast, right? Or bracket. And you're gonna feel that thing. You're gonna be like, okay, when is enough, and how am I handling that? And so it's going to be a great sign. Are you capable of being a developer? Can you handle that emotion as well?
There's a meme I think I just liked on LinkedIn a week or two ago. The junior developer says, I just got hired. I really hope that I don't screw up any code in production or I'm going to get fired. And the senior developer says, I've had 3 outages named after me in production. Right. It's such a good message for junior developers.
Yeah.
It's okay to make those mistakes. I remember my first developer job, and the entire website went down. And it was after code that I kind of just pushed up, and then it was launched by DevOps, and all of a sudden, the entire front end went down. I'm like, oh shit, what did I just do? And the thing is, it wasn't my fault. It was your fault. But I was so scared, and I remember my boss, the CTO came by. He's like, because he figured out what the problem was, and he's like, were you scared that it was your fault? He was just reading my mind. I didn't say anything. I'm like, I thought I just took the website down. He's like, I took the website down. It's like, oh, okay. And so, or it was like him or someone else, but it's funny because, it's just when you have that mentality of it's like, I think so many people are just so afraid to make a mistake, but when you have the mentality of you're eventually going to make a mistake, you just got to learn from it, but you are eventually going to make a mistake. You might make a big mistake. That to me is freeing. It's like, okay, I at least can take down the production server at least once, right? And not completely lose my job. That's not a goal. I'm not saying that should be your goal, right? But it completely changes your mindset about getting stumped, making mistakes, and like how you validate whether like you're progressing as a software engineer based on you getting stuck or making a mistake, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally.
It's, I'll have to post a meme in the Discord server if I can find it. But okay,
I remember seeing that one. Yeah.
Did you? It was a good one. All right, so let's do two more things that prevent developers from getting a job.
It went that fast, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think one that's super important, and people say it over and over again, and it's so true. You have to build something that is your own. The real learning happens when you're trying to apply what you've just academically learned through, lessons, exercises, into something that's, the Wild West, and that's your own stuff. And I would say any student, any aspiring developer should think of themselves as entrepreneur that are trying to ship a product.
I love that.
It doesn't mean you're going to do it. It doesn't mean that's your end goal, but think in those terms, because you're going to want to find a product, a website, a mobile app. And by the way, it doesn't matter if it's been done before, right? The point is not, being unique or, spending hours trying to find the right idea. And I've been stuck myself. Like I'm never going to have an idea that's so unique that, people are going to care. You don't look for a project that nobody has done before. You just look for a project that you can call your own, and where you're going to have enough background and insights to really push it really far, right? So you can think of, the next 20 features that you're going to add to that project. And that's going to be your main goal, to really implement those features at the pace that's going to be yours. But really, and everybody says that's when learning happens. It's when, you're going to think of a feature and you're going to be like, how am I supposed to do that? And that's when you're going to spend, hours maybe looking the web, maybe finding a library, finding an algorithm that someone has come up before, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that process of just discovering how you're going to implement a feature and then starting to do it and then stumbling and then fixing it, that's true learning. So if you're learning, on your own or through a coding bootcamp and you haven't yet invested time in having your own project, you're really, really missing on something.
I like that. Treat yourself as an entrepreneur building out a product, and you don't have to go the entrepreneur route to be able to do that. It's like you're talking about the entrepreneur. It's literally like to a T. That is what I preach when people are stuck on like, what do I build? What do I build that's going to help me grow? What do I build that's going to help me be more marketable? It's a literally just and you have to train yourself to identify problems. Like this isn't something that happens naturally for a lot of people. Like a lot of people get stuck on, well, give me something to build. Give me a clone to build. Give me some template to build, because at least I don't have to be creative. Because I can't be creative. I'm not creative enough. I'm not smart enough to think of these ideas. It's like, you 100% are, but you have to train your mind to do that. And so like a lot of like, if you talk to different founders and stuff like that, one thing that I learned is a lot of founders have like lists. They have lists next to their desk. And if they have an idea that comes in their head, they write it down immediately. They don't let it fleet. They write it down immediately, whether it's a spreadsheet or anything like that. And one thing I've learned talking to different founders is, these ideas start coming more plentifully if they consistently do that. They train themselves to do that. It's a really interesting strategy. And it really taught me, it's like being creative is a skill that you can improve. It's not an innate thing. It's a skill that you can improve.
100%. Let me add to that. Being creative very often is going down a rabbit hole and thinking about one thing with a little bit of obsession and finding ways to make it slightly different. Let me give you an example. After Facebook video, after YouTube, after Netflix, like who would have thought that there was any innovation possible in just video sharing? And then TikTok comes along and you're like, well, how is TikTok really different from any other video sharing platform? And it's very different in a very subtle way on some details. And it's a very niche area. It's not YouTube, it's not Twitch, it's TikTok. And so you can really go down a rabbit hole in finding a way to do something very, very different in just one aspect of it. Let me take another example. You're working in a hotel chain and you're doing front desk. And you're exposed every day to, the reservation system. And you notice that there's something in that reservation system that doesn't exactly do what you think it should be doing. That's your idea. Mm-hmm. And you're going to go down on that rabbit hole. You're going to push that concept, narrow that niche in a way to the maximum. And you'll surprise yourself how deep just that change goes. Because once you do that change, other pieces fall into play and you're like, wow, but then that means I can do that differently. I can do that differently. And so it's very much sort of often finding one small thing and just pushing that idea to the full extent that you get creative. And it's rooted in what you know and what you experience.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. Yeah, it's people try to come up with the perfect idea. The number of people, I would say I could count them on a hand, but there were people that would come to my meetup that are just like, okay, like I literally had someone that said, before I tell you my idea, you're going to sign an NDA. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so I had to talk through this with them, but it's like, and I need to, whenever something like that comes up, I try to be as nice about it as I can, but it's like your idea isn't unique. It's not unique. Everything has been created to some version or some extent, and like you're just creating more specific variants of, quite frankly, a lot of these ideas that have already been created. And maybe I'm a little incorrect with that, but when you have that mindset, you realize it's very easy to come up with entire company ideas, entire product ideas, just with different little variations. Like you said, with that reservation system, coming up with a variation of like, you wish they had this feature, but they didn't invest time into it. That's what I mentioned, the person, I need to shout him out. I just forgot his name, but he would create like a variation of QuickBooks, right? Yeah. It did it just a little bit differently. And I think he was even creating an extension for it. Maybe it was more of an extension than a separate app. I don't know, my memory's going. But it was very small. It was very minor. It was just simplifying things. It actually wasn't making things more complicated, creating like these really in-depth features that are like, oh, people just wanted more depth in the features. He's like, no, people wanted more simplicity. This is really confusing. It's like, I'm actually going to dumb this down for a lot of people. And, that solution to a lot of different problems is often the right one that people are really looking for. People feel overwhelmed all the time. So it doesn't have to be this like super in-depth variations. It's like, maybe try simplifying the apps that you use.
Exactly. Yeah. Simplification is a big deal. Like when you look at Facebook today, they're trying to do so many things. It's super bloated, right? And so a great company could be based on making, again, the Facebook like it was 20 years ago, because it will be streamlined. It will be re-optimized to a much better user experience, right? I mean, there's a ton of things like that, where you look at industries and you look at, companies that try to address so many different markets or competitors that all of a sudden the product is no longer, adequate. And so just rebuild that product the way it should be if you were to build it from scratch without all the additional, fluff on top of it. Let me share actually an idea that I have, and I'm not going to ask anyone for the NDA, obviously.
All right.
And that's something I'm serious about it. I thought about it 2 years ago. I've never really done it, but I think it's a good idea. And what matters is really how you're going to execute on it. Think about how Twitter is bringing constraints to how many words you can type. Think about how Snapchat is adding constraints to how much you can preserve and keep the messages or the features that you share. Think about now applying constraints to videos that you can watch. Think about a platform that will only allow a certain number of people to watch a video for so many minutes for so many times. Like I'm sending you a link done for a video. You can only watch once. You can only share once. And if you watch it, you only have 1 minute to watch it, meaning you cannot pause it, or maybe you can pause it just once. That's an idea. Like, what happens all of a sudden if you were to create constraints around just watching videos? Like, is it even an interesting scenario? But anyway, we're out of topic. It's not the scope of the thing. But I thought it was an interesting kind of idea. And maybe someone is going to do something with it. I don't know.
Maybe someone will, now that you tossed it out. That is interesting. I would be very interested to see the psychology that comes from it, how the comments look, how people interact with it. And you could even showcase, like, you could sell this data to marketers. You could literally showcase, like, okay, but if someone did put like an external link to one of their products, it's like, this video was so focused, it was so exclusive, because then it shut it off to the rest of the users. Now, like, I increased my conversion from like 5% to 15% of people actually clicked on that link and sign up for my product. Like, there's a lot of like really cool stuff that you can do just by creating, something
applying
that's
constraints. Applying constraints to something that exists actually creates new scenarios, right? And it's really interesting. Twitter's done it with text, Snapchat with messaging, but just pick anything and then apply a ton of constraints to it, and maybe something interesting is going to come out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting idea. Thanks for sharing. All right. Last thing. What is the final reason you think developers stand no chance at getting a job?
Do you want to talk about, the getting your first job and picking, or do you want to go for another one?
The QA thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that one.
All right. So, and I made a post on LinkedIn recently. It was interesting to see the feedback. I believe that there's so much competition right now in the industry, and I think you've covered that as well. It's getting so hard for junior developers to get junior developer roles. It's so much competition, that I don't think there is a luxury anymore of refusing your first offer. And I'm really describing, you've been looking for a job, a junior developer job, you get an offer. And my caveat is, if it's not a scam, because you're going to get scam offers, so of course you don't want to say yes to those. And I'll add a caveat, if it's a minimum of 60K, paid 60K, and if it's a dev job, you should say yes. And I also add to that, even if it's it's in the testing field, if it's a QA job, you should say yes. And the point that I'm making is that first job is just there to give you kind of a additional industry credit or experience credit. And in a year from now, you're not going to be in the junior category anymore, even though you're still a little bit junior, but people are going to look at your resume differently. Suddenly, you're going to have had experience in the industry, and your second job is going to be where you're going to make, the play that you want to make in terms of actual compensation, actual role, career progression, and everything. So that's kind of, that's something I feel quite strongly about. Given the current landscape, I mean, if it was 2015 again, I would have said something different. But there's so much competition in the junior dev role right now that I feel like, it's hard to be picky.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think too many people, I see this a lot on LinkedIn, I think too many people are overselling how open the entry-level market is, and I think that's inaccurate. I think we need to be a little bit more realistic. It's not that you can't get a job. It's that we are currently in times where the market is very oversaturated, and a lot of the open positions, quite frankly, that's my personal opinion, a lot of mid to senior level positions. A lot of those positions we see opening up are those. So for entry-level developers, now it might not be the time to get picky. You don't want to get scammed. You're right. There are offers like that. And I'm specifically think of like a lot of companies that just want to offer you equity, no salary, and a promise to fortune. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's those kind of companies I think you need to stay away from if you are trying to like pay the bills, right? But So I agree. I would say I agree so much that I think you should be willing, I think you should negotiate, but I think you should be willing to accept a job that pays the bills and gives you a little bit of a comfort where you can put some in your savings, right? And 60,000 in a lot of areas can do that. I would argue even in Chicago, 60,000, it's lower to start. It depends on the language, but JavaScript, it's definitely lower to start. But given where you live, just understand your bills. I think you need really good financial planning, because if you know your finances throughout, like you are a good financial planner, you can make a more educated decision on whether that's a salary you're willing to accept, and then maybe a year later move into and bump that salary way up, because now you have credibility, you have industry experience. I would argue I'm for that. And the thing is, I don't hear a lot of, if you give me $60,000, I don't hear a lot of people rejecting that necessarily. Do you?
I see people, and I think that's where we're getting into the type of role that if it's not written software engineer on it, even though coding may be involved, they're going to refuse the position, because they have an aspiration to really get that title. And I think that's where it can become misleading. I think there's honor and opportunity in, and we've talked about it, in doing testing. I really do. And it's true that there is a stigma around it. I mean, no denying people who have been doing, testing most of their career, it's going to be harder for them to get out of testing and be, in mainstream software development space. But I mean, I don't know if you want to comment on that. I mean, I have some additional arguments around that, but I'll let you actually chime in on this, because I think you have a slightly different point of view on it.
Sure. So I want to share a story. At my last company, we were an automation company. And we basically built automation for enterprise companies for the most part. You could almost think of us like a Zapier type company, and it was really interesting.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was we opened up roles for software engineering, and our system was getting so complex that a lot of companies just didn't, we would have long trainings to really help people understand a lot of this low code movement software, which is there is a lot of depth in it. There really is. And you could literally make a career off of a no code, low code movement like that. That opens up positions in the industry. I've talked about it. I think more people should be potentially open to it. Now, the reason why I'm skeptical as well is because these positions as software engineers were opened up. And then, people would come out of coding boot camps and then accept a software engineering role, and then come find out that they literally were doing maybe, I don't have the super accurate percentage, but I would estimate 5 to 10 to maybe 15% of coding when they signed up to be a software engineer, and they were building automations for the software. It was very internal. It's not something they could expand to another company necessarily, and they got stuck and sold a dream of software engineering when they weren't delivered that. And I remember having conversations with people next to me, and it's I saw that whenever they would finally get a little coding project, a custom project from someone else, it's they were super excited. They're yeah, that's what I want to do. And then they're back to building automations. And both people next to me were very kind people, and they had a very positive outlook on it. But when I talked to them more in depth, they were very disappointed. They were very disappointed with where they got stuck. And so I want to be careful. I guess there are multiple aspects to this. I think we need to be careful about overselling software engineering positions, and then not delivering that experience to them in I want to expand this into the coding bootcamp territory. You saw my conversation with Vincent. He brought up a really good thing. People don't sign up for a coding bootcamp to become anything else but to dive into coding. That's why they sign up, right? And so often we get into this territory of, market's really tough right now, and a lot of times coding bootcamps are under delivering. I've talked about overall, I think the education is lower quality in the industry given how oversaturated the market is right now. And so a lot of people are graduating coding boot camps, and then they are kind of told like, hey, you can get this QA position and it's a stepping stone into coding. And I very rarely see it as a stepping stone, because I've looked at thousands of LinkedIn profiles so far. A lot of people that get into QA that are trying to get into development, so many of them do not become a software engineer. I don't even remember, there probably are a few out there, I don't even remember anyone that's gone the QA role and then eventually the software engineer role. Yeah. And I've viewed so many profiles. Now, a lot of that kind of blurs, and maybe I'm forgetting a couple of pathways that I've seen, but my problem is it's coding boot camps and it's companies selling software engineer roles and then delivering something entirely different, and especially when they're willing to lower the salary because, well, you're not doing 100% of coding, right? But we're giving you an opportunity into the industry. It kind of feels like a very deceptive sell, and they're able to lower the salary that they have to pay those engineers or software engineers because that's the title they hold, but they're not really software engineers. They're not doing that. So the problem I have with that is more of the deception. And I think leaders of the industry and leaders of like coding boot camps need to be careful and be wary of really pushing people into those types of positions, even if you ever get a sense that they just 100% want to do coding. Does that make sense?
No, that it does. And anything that feels like a deception, of course, there's an issue with it. And so you should be worried about it and kind of ask probing questions to see if there's going to be any level of deception. Let me share with you my perspective on, the testing roles. And my perspective is mostly based on what I've seen in the industry and with my personal experience at Microsoft. Even though I was not a software engineer there, I kind of saw it. So Microsoft and the Googles and Amazon, they have roles, they call them SDET, Software Developer Engineer in Test. Back in the 2015 era, you had one tester for every one developer. Right. And the deal was developer will write the core code, toss it over the fence to the tester, who would actually apply a ton of unit tests and actually fix that code. So the tester will fix the code and ship the code. The developer will write the original code. Satya Nadella, when become the CEO of Microsoft, fired a bunch of software in test because the developer himself or herself was not spending enough time testing their own code. And actually, most of the work was done by the tester. And it was hurting the company because the whole cycle of going back and forth meant that Windows, for example, only shipped every 3 years. And so there was a big movement that says, okay, developers also have to do their own test. And so in the industry right now, you're going to see the ratio of 1-to-1 going to 1-to-10 or 1-to-100. So that's one aspect. And by the way, software developer in test at Google, Microsoft, Amazon are paid exactly the same salaries. They're considered part of the engineering profession. Now, what's interesting for me about testing is it comes with its own set of frameworks. And actually, a lot of them are running on, and you're going to use JavaScript. It's Cypress, it's Cucumber, it's Jasmine, it's Mocha, and Selenium. I mean, there's a ton of framework. And you're the world of automation. Automating testing is a big deal as well, right? You want to write the script, you want to run the test every night or after you ship. It's part of the CI/CD, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm trying to say is there are good testing roles. If the testing role includes coding, includes those software testing frameworks, in my mind, there will not be any deception there, because yes, it's testing, but it's coding. It's a lot of coding, and it's testing software at scale and reproducing the test, etc. I will be a little bit provocative though in saying, if the QA role that we give you doesn't include any automation or any software development, you could see that as a huge opportunity. Because if they didn't think about automating it, that means you kind of have free reign to be, the best in that role and kind of crushing it because you're going to bring in, all those frameworks. You're going to automate the test. You're going to do the writing and the code writing. So that could be also, they say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed people are king. If you're part of a group that does testing and has not yet automated everything, and that has not yet used code to automate, you're gonna be great. You're gonna be fantastic. And then, of course, I think you're right. There are those potentially, tricks and deception that happens when, we're sending you a position that is really not what it is. And then you just have to, evaluate the position, and maybe there's still a reason for you to say yes, because you're going to get that first year. You're going to be out of there a year later, and your resume is going to look that much better. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. I think I have two things to say with that. The first, I agree with the software engineer in test. I had a buddy that did that, eventually moved to a software engineer role. I think that's pretty closely aligned, and I do think that's a stepping stone. But I honestly never thought of the QA position. You kind of gave me a different perspective, because initially I wanted to say, like, a lot of QA positions that I know, it's like they stay QA for a long time. And but if you have the drive to start building automations on the side, like you're getting your job done, you are starting to create an automated system, that is actually fantastic. That I can see as being a solution to jump into a software engineering role eventually, maybe not even at that company, but a lot of other companies, if you do that and you take the reins and companies want software engineers that are going to take that initiative like that. That's a huge story to tell in the interview. And you built the entire automated system from scratch, right? So that's actually, that's a good idea. The problem I see with it is you need to make a commitment, because a lot of people that have these ambitious goals go into a QA position. They realize, okay, first 3 months, I'm just overwhelmed. I'm learning so much. And I think some people set unrealistic expectations for themselves and then kind of just default to doing the minimum possible to just do well at the job. And, a lot of people have families. A lot of people have just different responsibilities in life. And so I would argue, if you're going to go that route, quite frankly, if you are going to go outside of the scope of your responsibilities, expect to spend more than 40 hours a week, right? That's where, if you're an ambition, that's what I would do. That's what I have done in the past, but that's me, and I have the energy for it, and I have the lifestyle that can accommodate that. So I would go in with that realistic expectation that you're going to spend more hours, and if you have the drive and ambition, I think you can accomplish that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because the world of testing, especially when you start to bring in those frameworks, it's complex and rich. And so if you want to be able to, move around from testing to, writing the code in the first place, you're going to have to really juggle those two aspects. There's another point of view to that, which is it is complex and rich. And I'll bet that it's actually your current niche in the industry that has more opportunities than the number of people applying for them. And I think some people may actually find that if you're specializing, again, in that really high end of testing with those frameworks, and you're marketing yourself that way, you actually may find a job maybe easier, faster than everybody else, because you're now focusing on the niche. Now you have to be ready then to ask yourself, okay, am I going to make a career out of that? Because once you start specializing, to your point, may be hard to go back to the other side. But is it a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, I'll say anyone's looking and wondering, okay, what should I accept a job in QA or doing testing? Just explore Cypress, explore Cucumber, see what's involved. Look at those frameworks, just like you would learn React, do a tutorial or two. And I'll tell you, it's pretty involved and it's pretty interesting.
I think that's a good recommendation. I think that's a good recommendation. I'm a big fan of automation, and I'm exploring it in different capacities at the moment. But yeah, I feel like you almost kind of changed my perspective on it. I thought I was going to completely disagree. So I think you had a good take on it.
It's a great conversation to have. So You've made great points as well.
Well, and yeah, but you gave this realistic expectation of kind of where the industry is right now as well. And I think we need to have that conversation. We really do. And I think ultimately, I would still argue, 99% of people pursuing software engineering, go to coding bootcamp, et cetera, they want to get into coding, right? Well, we talked about a lot of people that haven't really explored initially yet, so maybe that's not true. But the more important thing is, like, it's okay. I do agree. It's okay to be open to different positions. It's okay to move from software engineering to product management. I've seen that happen. And more to like front-end developers that move into UX and design. I've seen that happen, right? And so it's okay to be open to those opportunities, and it does not hurt to explore them a little bit, even if that means having a conversation with someone in that industry, sending a message on LinkedIn or something like that. Because I literally just had a one-on-one where, this guy was kind of exploring what that path really was. Was it coding? Was it something else? So yeah, people are having those thoughts. It's a good point. All right. That's it. A lot of good points.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on, Ludo. I always have a good conversation with you. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree at all. But Ludo, shut yourself out. What do you want to talk about?
Well, first, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the chat. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Last time was a little bit more than a year from now. And I still have people telling me, hey, I saw you with Don, and that kind of made up my mind, and that's why I'm here now. So no, just to say, so I run a coding bootcamp called New Camp. We are trying to provide the best value we can for less money than everybody else. And it's kind of our mantra, trying to decrease the risk and that people may get into by, signing up for a coding bootcamp. So if you're interested, just check us out, newcamp.co, and and we hope to see you soon.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, check them out. I'll include the links in the description. But Ludo, thanks so much for coming on. This was fun.
Thanks again, Don.